Hello, I'm Tull from the Irish Politics newsletter, and as always, I'm with my co-host, Vince Martin from Wall Street and Maine. How are you today, Vince?
Very well. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at the Atlanta Current.
You didn't go to Davos this week?
I did not. I had other pressing appointments, and they kept calling and saying, come on, you got to give a speech. You can follow Trump. And I was like, busy.
Yeah, the wife took the private plane this week. Unlike me, I had to get a train and got a mountain guide halfway up the mountain to Davos to see what the crack was up there. The 2026 slogan for Davos was called A Spirit of Dialogue.
After it's over, it's not entirely unfitting.
Well, the dialogue seemed to be, one-way traffic, and it was all directed at Trump from the Europeans and the Canadians.
That's true.
Yes, it is. It was Christine Lagarde walked out, stormed out of a meeting when Howard Lutnick started lecturing. He just decided to lecture the Europeans, and Christine Lagarde stormed out, and he was heckled.
Yeah.
He was heckled by European billionaires about what he was saying about Europe. And then it was all very fraught. It was all very tense. Nobody knew where they were going. And Trump rocks on up, and he's there to announce his board of peace, and nobody's quite sure what it is or what it's about. But it's a who's who of some of the most authoritarian people in the world, would you believe? Are you surprised?
Not terribly. Board of Peace sounds like something from like Marx Brothers Duck Soup or something, where there's like almost got to be a satirical, ironic aspect to the name, right?
These group countries are so bad, Israel won't even join them. So they have Hungary, Armenia, Kosovo, Pakistan, Albania, Uzbekistan, Bahrain, Qatar, Indonesia, all nominally democracies, but on the face of it, all authoritarian. Right. Okay, so Belarus is there, famously democratic country, famously country that takes civil rights seriously.
And avoids war at all costs, yeah.
Yes, 4 years ago, they hijacked a Ryanair airplane, would you believe, over their airspace and forced it.
Believe it or not, I never knew that. I'd never heard of
they kidnapped the dissident and took him off the prison, and he hasn't been seen since.
Okay. Yeah, no, I never heard that.
This is what's left of the USA's global standing after 1 year of Trump's second term. So things are quite ominous at the moment. And funny enough, I don't think the Board of Peace is going to have to work out well. They all have to pay $1 billion to Trump.
Right.
Okay, to Trump, and he'll administrate it. So as you can imagine, that's really going to go down well, isn't it?
Yeah, I do know there's some worries about where exactly that money's going and who controls it. Similarly, with the funds that we are garnering from our seized Venezuelan oil, which, according to some reports, is going into some kind of slush fund that may or may not violate the letter and the spirit of the United States Constitution. But, hey, it is what it is.
Well, it's Trump grifting, and the Democrats being powerless to stop him. I mean, this Board of Peace, the Financial Times tells me it has 6 kings, 3 old Soviet time servers, a couple of junta guys in dress uniforms, the big medals and the sunglasses.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
One gentleman can't change a plane in Europe without an extradition warrant for somebody's buried a load of people in mass graves and that kind of stuff. It's like a United Nations for dictators, I think, is what it is, essentially.
And not even like the fun kind of dictators, right?
No, they probably... I don't know if you've ever been to Geneva, but it's a beautiful city. They probably think it's too woke or something. Or at The Hague, the Hague, they're getting their hackles up over mass graves and stuff. That's terrible business. No, they're too woke. Human rights, war crimes, no, woke nonsense. All of it woke nonsense. So Davos was the place to be this week. It was some incredible quotes, some incredible speeches. First of all, Mark Carney from Canada, Prime Minister of Canada, he gave a speech where, political scientists have been reading for years. Did you catch the speech once?
I have caught it, yeah. I thought it was quite powerful. And the line about it, it's not, what is it? It's not a transition, it's a rupture.
Yeah.
You do wonder if that's not one of those lines that just gets used so much that it just becomes shorthand for exactly what's happened over the last year and what's likely to happen for the next 3 years. That's a book title kind of line from that speech.
Yeah, I think after he steps down he's removed his Canadian Prime Minister. I mean, he'll take over as United Nations Secretary General maybe or something. He's a very impressive gentleman. He really is an incredibly deep thinker about what goes on around him. And while he didn't mention the United States explicitly, he was absolutely talking about the United States, Russia, China. He said, "We argue the middle powers must act together because if we are not at the table, we're on the menu." They're incredible lines. It was an incredible speech. And, there was a lot of good quotes from it. Macron said, "We prefer respect to bullies and we do prefer the rule of law to brutality." And Macron rocked on up to the Davos summit with a pair of aviator sunglasses looking like something out of Terminator.
They are sharp, man. The French know how to do it. Even their politicians. He still looks cool. I was impressed.
Yeah, he did. Everybody was looking at him. This is the coolest guy ever.
Yeah.
California Governor Gavin Newsom delivered some of the forum's most combative rhetoric.
Right.
He urged European leaders to stop being complicit and have a backbone in standing up to Trump and his demands over Greenland, which is fair enough. Gavin Newsom is probably the only non-useless Democrat fighting back against Trump at the moment.
Well, I think that may have something to do with the fact that his pollster is telling him that if he tries to, to act as much like the non-useless Democrat as possible, it is no secret what his ultimate ambition is, I don't think. But I think he's been the most vocal Democrat, period. There's no one in D.C. who has had the same voice or certainly the same reach.
Will the Democrats pick another Californian uber liberal to run for president, or should it move to somewhere more center ground?
It depends on what Newsom does over the next 2 years to get ahead of that reputation.
Okay.
It's basically he's going to have to do things and say things and position himself that he's not Harris, that he's a moderate Democrat who happens to be from California. And I think some of the stuff that he's done in that state, he's pushed back on some left-wing efforts and things like that. The line he has to walk is he has to rally the base while also being attractive enough to moderate voters. Basically Trump won the election because of voters who said, "I don't like Trump, but I like Harris even less."
Yeah,
he's got to win them. That's the Democratic thing, but that's a separate episode.
It's not for who I'm voting for, it's who I'm voting against, isn't it?
It really has been so much the last couple elections. Yeah.
But Newsom was quite strong. He said he should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders.
Yeah.
So they understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. But I actually agree with him there, to be perfectly honest. But Europe did stand up this week. Europe was stood up and was counted, I think. Okay, the Belgian Prime Minister came out with very strong words also. There's a very fine line between appeasement and, standing up for yourself and all that. And you see this with Greenland, and the text messages were released about Trump saying, you didn't give me a Nobel Peace Prize, so I want Greenland. Okay, because I'm not a man of peace anymore, and that the memes started flying up. People showing Trump taking medals off small children because he wanted to be appreciated.
And alongside that, the insistence that the government of Denmark somehow controlled the process of a private selection committee in Norway.
Yeah,
and also the fact that the way the Peace Prize works, it actually, when they give the Peace Prize, it's kind of what you did up to a certain point, and I forget the date, but basically nothing in this term could have qualified him for that Peace Prize just based on how the rules is. Like, ostensibly, he could have gotten it next year for ending the 8 wars that he says he's ended and all those sorts of things. The personal grievance becoming part of geopolitics itself is just insane. It is kind of doubly darkly funny that the personal grievance is based on just massive conspiracy theory and a complete inability to understand how exactly the thing you're talking about works.
And again, there's an element of Trump saying, "Look what my left hand is doing, so I see what my right hand is doing." And I think there's a lot of that going on with Greenland also, because he backed down. Taco Trump showed up, said, "We're not going to take Greenland by force." And then he said, "Oh, the tariffs," so he's backed down on the tariffs as well. So
right.
Taco Trump has showed up, and the funny thing is, before Trump arrived on the scene, he had all his heavy hitters in Davos, saying we're invading Greenland, we're taking Greenland, whether you like it or not. You had Jameson Greer? He's a Trump's trade representative.
Right.
And he told everybody at Davos that tariffs were a legitimate geopolitical instrument, okay? Now, the problem with him telling people at Davos that tariffs were a geopolitical instrument is that Nobody takes them seriously. These are serious bankers, serious high finance people, and every single one of them know that the American consumer pays for the tariffs. The bankers know this, the finance people know this. He still had the US trade representative go out and, tell these bankers and high finance people that, tariffs are legitimate. And they're not. They're paid by Americans. A comprehensive analysis of US trade data from January 24 to November 2025 by the Kiel Institute in Germany found that US buyers, US consumers, that's you, Vince,
Yep.
absorbed 96% of the tariff costs, with foreign producers only paying 4%.
Right.
Okay, so Trump can bang on about tariffs all he wants, but it's your bottom line that he's hitting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think the one way you would push back on that is say, actually, our inflation is actually pretty low. Our prices aren't moving that much. I follow a lot of companies that are impacted by tariffs, and one thing that's interesting is most of them have said that basically they're not passing the cost on. They're generally finding ways in their business to offset it. The problem is that kind of only works once. And the other issue too being that those one way to offset that, the obvious way is to lay people off. In terms of that issue, yeah, this insistence that, the EU is paying the tariffs is just silly. I mean, I don't want to be the guy who just ignores an economic study, but I'll personally, I'm actually a little skeptical of the figure based on what I've seen kind of bottom up. I think some of the Asian importers have definitely taken a hit. I mean, we know that that's happening. I think some U.S. companies are taking a hit. That 96% figure strikes me. What I'm seeing on a day-to-day basis is too high, but your broad point still holds. It's literally not what happens. And it is telling, I think, to your point, that his representatives have to go out and talk to people who are longtime experts and real players in the global economy and insist to them that what they've known their whole life is not true. It's a little bit crazy.
And then some people seem to think this is all part of Trump's strategy. He's
right. Yeah, the 4D chess. Yep.
Yeah, he's playing 4D chess. He's moving parts around the board. He's always on top of things. This is all part of his grand strategy. He knows what he's doing here. He's playing pawns off queens, Germany off France, England off Sweden. He knows what he's doing. It's 4D chess is the buzzword in geopolitical circles. And I don't agree with that. I think it's become an almost derisory term here in Europe at the moment. I've seen this on a lot of very right-wing bloggers and media personalities in the United States talking about 4D chess. In Europe, it's become synonymous for when, government blunders around the world stage like a drunk. Yeah, and to go back to where 4D chess came from, it began somewhere in Nerdland, I'd say, probably Reddit.
Yeah.
It meant a game that's so complex that you needed an extra dimension and probably an extra brain to follow it before being taken hostage by political junkies who used it whenever their favourite leader does something that looks catastrophically stupid, and people are coming out by saying, it looks stupid now, but 10 moves time, he's going to own the whole board. It's
right.
So.
Yeah, that's been a favorite rationalization of Trump supporters for about a decade now, in one form or another, for sure.
You see it all over X and anywhere Trump has a massive presence. Trump posting to Truth Social at 3:00 in the morning because he has insomnia is not 4D chess.
Or changing his mind based on the last person he talked to, which is something that we actually have a lot of evidence that really does happen. We've seen that explanation over and over. It's the explanation we're getting for Greenland. It's what we got about Ukraine. It's what we got about the tariffs in April. It's what we got about all sorts of different things during the first term. The government shutdown that he had, I want to say it was winter 2018, which he lost badly. But the big problem in this case is something that you've brought up before, which is the fact that if you're saying he's playing 4D chess relative to Greenland, you have to at least have a hypothetical answer for a very important question, which is what can he possibly get? In other words, if he's saying that he wants Greenland, but it will settle for less, and this is part of some galaxy brain negotiation strategy, which the other thing they say along 4D chess is, he wrote this in The Art of the Deal. It's like, yeah, that book was published 40 years ago. He didn't write it, and he went bankrupt 5 years later. Why are we acting like this is the Bible of foreign policy? But if you're going to make that case, you have to have even a hypothetical. You don't have to read his mind. He doesn't have to say it. Give me a hypothetical win that he can get by asking for Greenland and settling for less, because as to the point you've made before, everything that he's now supposedly settling for, he had 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
3 months ago, 6 months ago. Greenland has already said you can have bases and you can have the minerals.
And that's what they're giving him. And that's what he's claiming as a win today, that I'm going to get more bases and more minerals and all the rest. But he had that anyway.
Yeah, he had that in his pocket. Yeah, what he got, he has the framework of a deal. And he told a CNN reporter who asked him how long the deal would last. And he said, oh, it's infinite.
Yeah, infinite. Yeah.
He has that going for him. There's definitely no way another president might ever try and change the terms of a deal Donald Trump negotiated.
A common thread I see across social media platforms and even talking points from is Howard Lutnick or Scott Bessent, his two most powerful economic advisors. And the reporters go out of their way to ask them in very plain English, what's the deal that we got? And they'll go around in circles, bring you up to the top of the road and back down the road, and they'll say it helps America and it hurts liberals or something to that effect, or it hurt Europe. So basically, the journalists are looking at them and thinking, you've no idea either what the deal is, okay?
Right.
And they don't. They don't. They absolutely do not.
And Trump actually addressed what we're talking about in his speech, because we've talked before about the fact he was asked about this by the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, and he said he needed it psychologically, right, for his own success.
Yeah,
and
for mental health.
Yeah. In his speech, he said that you need the ownership. He said, number one, quote, legally, it's not defensible that way. I don't know what that means. I think if you have a treaty with Denmark that says that you can put a base on Greenland.
They did multiple bases on Greenland.
That's pretty legal, especially since the treaty was 1951 it was signed. And he says, number two, psychologically, who the bleep wants to defend a license agreement or a lease, which is a large piece of ice in the middle of the ocean where, if there is a war, much of the action will take place on that piece of ice.
He's barely literate. He's an idiot of such preponderance. I'm surprised he can read the teleprompter.
Yeah, I cannot imagine what that even means. That you're saying you don't want to defend a place psychologically. That's the place where the action in the war. And this war is for your survival. If this is a war against China or Russia, this is not some typical American intervention in another country. If we don't own Greenland, we're going to be less psychologically inclined to shoot down a Chinese ICBM. I don't want to call my own president an idiot. As you did, I think it's but so maybe I'll just have to stop talking.
He confused Greenland with Iceland a couple of times yesterday in a speech. Went off piste. He rambled on for over an hour. I saw some very prominent political and financial commentators are openly talking about him being mentally impaired. That he's just I don't know if that's the case or not. I tend to switch off if I watch too much Trump. I need to get out and go for a walk the dogs. He seems very mentally disturbed, and something's deeply wrong with him. And it's embarrassing for the United States, but for a wider geopolitical global order, it's quite dangerous.
I mean, I don't think he's mentally impaired at all.
So, okay, let me push back at that. He's either mentally impaired, or he's a lot less intelligent than people think he is. It's one of the two. I don't see a third way here.
I don't see a third way either. That's part of why the 4D chess arguments, I think, are quite attractive, even to people who are not Trump supporters. Conservatives who would choose him over the left, or people in the middle who have qualms about some of his stuff. The 4D chess stuff plays because that provides a pretty comforting explanation relative to your explanation, which is that he is just going to Davos. He is giving a speech about a topic of incredible importance, and he literally cannot define the goal that he and all the people around him, including Vance and Rubio, have all come out. We need Greenland. We need Greenland. We need Greenland. And then Trump has to give a speech to say why he needs Greenland. And he literally just can't say the words.
He can't pull it out of his back pocket.
Elsewhere in the speech where he talks about World War II, and he says, quote, "We were fighting to save it for Denmark." Okay, that's fair. And then in the very next breath, After the war, we gave Greenland back to Denmark. How stupid were we to do that?
Only one person died on Greenland in World War II, and he was a Danish person.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes,
yeah, my World War II history is sadly.
I read that's something really obscure.
That's a nonsensical statement. You can't have it both. And I do think that explains the 4D chess, the appeal of that argument, because the alternative that you're bringing up, there's 30% of this country, or let's say, you just wholeheartedly believe that and believe that from the jump. For most other people, it's not a comforting thing.
Because he comes out with some mad things. One of the funniest things, he was in Switzerland where their main language is German, and he was saying, only for us, we speak in German. So all the German speakers in the audience were kind of looking at him saying, we already speak German anyway. But anyway, what did he say about wind farms? China doesn't use wind farms or something, was it?
Yeah, he said China's really smart. Wind farms are a scam, and China knows it because China sells all the windmills. But the quote was something nuts. Like, I looked for wind farms in China. I can't find them or something. And you're just like, I don't even know. Like,
I think
they're
13%
the largest.
Off the top of my head is 13 or 14% of all.
It's a big number. They're like the largest. Yeah. I mean, they have wind farms everywhere, solar everywhere. You read that transcript, there really is stuff that jumps out. And I will say this, though. The first half of his speech, when he talks about America and he talks about the American economy, there are things there that I think are actually good. There are things that they have done, good things that they have done domestically in terms of the economy. And then I think also to Europeans who keep going, why are people reelecting this guy after, January 6th and when he's rambling on stage and all this stuff? It was really odd to read because the first half I'm looking at it and I'm like, you know what? I kind of agree with that. I kind of agree with that. I kind of agree with that. And our economy is actually in really good shape. And I've made this point before. Everyone so far, that's a big caveat, but everyone so far has been wrong about the tariffs. We had predictions here that when Christmas came around, all the shelves are going to be empty. We had, double-digit inflation. It's going to crush this. And no one's seen that. And I'm sure that's emboldened him as well. I don't think his base needed much reason to hate the quote-unquote experts, but they're no doubt taking a victory lap. But there is an interesting dichotomy there. Like, I do want to just call that out a little bit because we're picking on some of the stuff he said, and I think with some justification, but it is an interesting speech in that it does at least give you a glimpse of why he's there, of why he won again, and why there are a lot of people who are just going to look at the first half of the speech and like that, and they're going to do what we're talking about with 4D chess and just write off the second half. He's just talking. It's foreign policy. It's negotiation. It's the art of the deal. Doesn't count.
It's wild that there could be so differing views about him in both sides of the Atlantic, considering the speeches that were given, and they were all aimed at him. There's no doubt about it that they were all, the speeches from the Belgian Prime Minister, the French President, Mark Carney, they were all aimed foursquare at Donald Trump.
And no one else. Absolutely. Yep.
And no one else. And it's extraordinary that anybody could look at Trump's actions in Greenland. And I wrote a piece that I took during the week. I took on some criticism for it because the gist of my article was that I don't think Europe should be enabling fascism as a foreign policy option. And I took on some water of that because, again, people were divided whether Trump's a mad genius, madman, 4D chess player, Nazi, fascist. Take your pick of everything he's been labelled this week. And you are not going to sit 100 people down in the room and you're not going to have any agreement on what actually Trump is or what he stands for.
What this week also shows, particularly if you get into the weeds in the speech a little bit, as we just did, is that it has to be binary.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, no one agrees, but it's not no one agrees in the sense that there are 35 people who think he's a genius and 30 who think he's a moron. And then there's 35 who are like, he's average. Everyone's just going to be on the complete far poles of each other because these are complete and total logical failures. And so that your argument's going to be, well, why is he saying things that completely fail from any logical perspective? And your two options are, it's a genius plan or he's an idiot.
Yeah, there's no middle ground. I does the CB grand, as we say in Ireland. Mark Carney had a telling line in one of his speech and he said, nostalgia is not a strategy.
Yeah.
And right now, Europe is nostalgic for George W. Bush or George W. H. Bush. We're nostalgic for all kinds of Republicans that came before Donald Trump, or we take your pick of bad. Nixon, we take Nixon right now. We would over Trump. Was Nixon as bad as Trump? No, yeah, on a historical level, almost certainly not. He was, of course, tricky Dicky, and he engaged in some very poor behavior.
Yeah,
but not on the same level as Trump, I don't think.
That's another explanation that you might have heard proffered for Trump's behavior this week is that idea that he stole the quote madman theory from Nixon. And what this is Nixon told Henry Kissinger, who is his Secretary of State and point man for negotiations on foreign policy. Nixon explicitly told Kissinger to tell the people he was negotiating with to say that he was crazy. Basically go ask for something. If they say no, it's go, well, look, I can't control Nixon. He's crazy. He might drop a nuclear bomb. And so people say, oh, Trump has learned that madman theory. He's doing it again, which is even more insane than 4D chess arguments for a couple of reasons. Number one is that the whole point of madman theory is that you apply it to people who are hostile.
Yeah.
Right? You apply it to people with whom you have poor relations because the downside of them thinking that your president is a psychopath is effectively zero. If they hate you, it doesn't matter what they think of your president. Applying that to your allies is just nonsensical. MAGA's attitude towards Europe in particular is I think many of them would say, well, Europe isn't an ally anymore. They're maybe not an enemy, but they're taking advantage or what all the other stuff. The bigger issue with this madman theory is Nixon used it in Vietnam. Like that's how he tried to get the North Vietnamese to the negotiating table to agree.
Because he was crazy, man. Yeah.
Yeah, that was his strategy. It was one of the most spectacular failures in the history of American foreign policy. It never worked. It never came close to work. We left in disgrace. We had people jumping onto helicopters off the U.S. Embassy in Saigon by the time that war was over. And
an iconic image, yes.
Yeah, one of the most famous images of the 20th century. And it just goes to show, I think, how far people are stretching to try and ascribe some method to this. He's acting like a madman. Well, I think sometimes he just thinks stuff. And he said at an evening session at Davos something which I think really explains a lot. He said something like, oh, it's not liberal. It's not a conservative. He goes, it's just 95% common sense. And he really does have that view that this stuff is also very simple. And
it's not.
That's, I think, so appealing to his supporters and so horrifying to his detractors. I don't believe the world is a simple place. Saying, oh, well, we're executing a negotiating strategy over Greenland. It's very simple. No, it's not. There are real world complications and real world downsides to trying this.
When you talk about Trump being a binary character, you're either with us or you're against us. He's firmly put Europe in the against him camp now. There is no walking this back until his presidency is over because he cannot be trusted. He said in this Davos speech that the US has never needed NATO. Okay? Only one country in the world has ever invoked the famous Article 5.
Yep.
And that was after 9/11, the United States did.
Yep.
And Denmark had the highest casualties out of everybody from NATO apart from the United States of America. And I think Denmark are feeling that very, very strongly at the moment.
Yeah, it's incredibly insulting. It really is. It really is to say that.
And he's turned the whole of Europe against him. They're until he's kicked out from office, until he leaves, or he goes, or he he's not going quietly into the good night and all that. Like, he will test the limits of American democracy. But for now, he's made an implacable enemy of Europe. Most of Europe, anyway, apart from Hungary.
We had that conversation, a few episodes ago where I kind of said, well, once he's gone, doesn't everything go back to normal? And you said no. And I think now you have to say no with like 6 expletives, and then absolutely not and everything else. And that, to the point about this 4D chess stuff, even if you believe that, people kind of go, oh, you just ask for something big and then you settle. Well, in a real estate negotiation, you're not spending the rest of your life neighbors to that person. It's a one-off deal. If they don't like you or if you insult them, it's over. You just move on. A big part of it, unfortunately, is American arrogance, right? I mean, we're like, oh, well, we're America, Europe. I mean, they're kind of a bit player.
Yeah, back to American exceptionalism again. Yes, of course. Yeah.
There's this weird belief among a lot of people that this is like a cost-free exercise. You say you need Greenland. If you don't get it, you make a deal. Everybody's happy. No, people are not happy. You've done real damage to alliances, and Trump, deep in his heart, he believes what he's saying. I don't think he really thinks those alliances do matter. He thinks, Europe's taking advantage of America anyways. But I don't think that's the case. You said a couple things in the course of this podcast about, that I'm sure you never thought you would say about your attitude towards America and, its role in upholding, as you put it in the Elon Musk episode, the liberal world order. That doesn't just snap back in 2029.
Doesn't. We leave it on this, but one final question. Why do you think he backed down?
I think it's still a red line. Invading Greenland would just be so dramatically unpopular. Doing anything to kind of ratchet up the tension like we do in a lot of these situations, sending aircraft carriers or fighter jets, I don't think that would have helped. And God forbid someone had an accident and a sailor died because we were trying to intimidate Denmark. That's not going to play politically. I just don't think the political will is there outside his base and even within his base, probably.
There's two trains of thought here in Europe as to why he didn't follow through on his threats to invade Greenland. And the first one is because he knew his generals might say no in carrying out his orders to invade Greenland because it would have been an illegal order. There was a lot of heavy-hitting academics coming out writing articles saying it would be an illegal order for any soldier to invade Greenland.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And second of all is that Europe holds about 12 trillion in US stocks and bonds, somewhere between 10 and 12 trillion. And that Europe is prepared to having talks about weaponizing and using that against the United States. If he had gone into Greenland, I think the smart people, if there are any in his administration, would have sat him down and said, you're going to tank the world economy. You're talking 2006 crash levels.
I don't think there's any doubt about that. The stock market plunges. The treasury market gets completely untethered. I'm sure if anybody in the administration even mentally just war gamed out how that would have gone, just politically and economically, even just from a domestic standpoint, I would hope somebody told him that it would have been an absolute disaster. I would prefer somebody had told him, that we should honor our international commitments and not threaten our allies. But sometimes you have to take what you can get.
Yeah, I don't think he cares about international commitments anymore.
No.
I don't think we go back to any kind of normality within the next 5 to 10 years. So
yeah,
that's a pretty grim note to end on, Vince.
We keep doing that.
Yes, it's my inner nihilism. I bring you to dark places when you're all sweetness and light.
I blame politics. I don't know why it has to be so serious all the time. It's getting out of hand.
So what are we doing on the next episode?
We are going to stay on the continent, right? And we're going to talk Mercosur. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing it right.
Mercosur, yes.
Mercosur,
one of the biggest trade deals of all time, geopolitical trade deals of all time. And it's caused an awful lot of headaches for governments all across Europe. So
I can't wait. That's an episode off for me. I'm going to ask 6 questions and spend the rest of the time sipping a Guinness. So I hope you got your notebook ready.
I'll do all the heavy work here for us. And if you like what you hear, why don't you share the podcast? Reach out to us on social media and say hi.
Yep, please do.
I'm Tull from the Irish Politics Newsletter.
And I'm Vince Martin from Wall Street, Maine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye now.